many other good intention thing like the electoral bonds that came out of Mr. Jaitley's personal conviction. Do you think this is workable to create a pool where the government kind of, decides?
This is something which lot of retired election commissioners have said.
Yes.
But there's something called incentive in democracy.
Right.
You need to be incentivized to give money.
Yes.
No one is going to give money for just charitable reasons.
Yes.
There is politics of charity. Let's be honest about it. It's like there is, sometimes there's politics of spirituality.
Right.
There's politics of charity.
Yes.
Nothing comes for free. There's no free lunch in politics. So one has to be, it's either ideology, motivation, or to suit a person or a personality or party. That is why people give money. Now there has been Indrajit committee report. Then there has been Veerappa Moily's second administrative commission.
Right.
Then there has been another report which came, I think, when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. Some said partial funding, some said state funding.
Right.
We can't have state funding. And why should anyone create a corpus whereby a party which gets maximum number will get maximum fund?
Yeah.
I mean to say politics is not charity.
Right.
Issue is how do you create a balance between a function or a mean which does not erode the process of democracy, as the Supreme Court said, and victimization.
Yes.
Do you think that the people who are running us are saints? If their parties come to know that this particular gentleman has not given us money, then what happens? Isn't Adani Ambani an issue which Rahul Gandhi has made?
Yes, that's very important.
Tomorrow, what prevents if after 10 years the BJP is out of power, someone will say, okay, you're Adani Ambani.
Yes.
Which means that again we are going to go back to the politics of 60s and 40s.
Right.
So I think lot more needs to go into it. Effort of late Arun Jaitley, since I was part of those off-record briefings, and the long conversation he would try to educate a lot of young journalists like me was, you need to create a system. Some system needs to be in place, good or bad. That is why if you look at the last line of the press release, he says there has to be some system, good or bad. You need to channelize this money. So now we are again, it's like a full circle.
Right, we've come full circle. And in fact, when you said Mr. Jaitley's well-intentioned move to streamline this whole thing of electoral funding, I was reminded of the late Manohar Parrikar, what he had actually proposed about this corruption in defense deals. He said that let agents register themselves and do legitimate business, represent arms companies and, lobby for them. They asked arms agents to lobby, and arms agents said, we are not going to register ourselves. Absolutely not.
It's like that. The purists would say, "Arey bhai, this is rerouting of black money." When the window was opened by Chidambaram, and then I think when Arun Jaitley, I think the first tenure as the finance minister, people said, "Ye to aap black ka white kare," but at least it's coming back into the system.
It's coming back into the system. There is some kind of regulatory
which came after
scrutiny.
1970s was the money was out of the system. Money needs to. Today, tell me one thing. A lot of people made fun of demonetization. I have stopped carrying my wallet.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really telling you, I've stopped carrying my wallet. Do you remember going to Pan ki
Your
dukaan?
phone is your wallet.
Huh?
You got your wallet right there.
He would give you 5 toffees.
Yes.
Sorry, change nahi hai. Has anyone given you that? I think, we really need to create a committee of experts, all party consensus for electoral reforms, because the biggest issue of corruption is from elections. Tell me, why do the best of mine, Sandeep, they try to open these companies right before elections, policy making, or survey companies, or the mood of the nation. Why do they crop up? Have you ever thought of that? Why do so many? It's money which is circulating around.
Money. In fact, Kartikeya, since you mentioned this, the Association for Democratic Reforms is one of the NGOs that petitioned the Supreme Court for scrapping the electoral bonds. And earlier in the day, Justin Thomas, my colleague, spoke with Jagdeep Chokar of the ADR. Let's listen into their conversation.
Well, we will go about it the same way as we were doing before 2017. I mean, let me clarify that the electoral bond scheme did not remove any illegal money from the electoral system. It only provided a cloak or a legal cloak to bring illegal money into the electoral system, which gave an unfair advantage to the ruling party and which deprived voters of of their fundamental right to find out where do political parties get their money from. And it is for these two primary reasons that the Supreme Court struck it down. So we are back to where we were in 2017. The system in 2017 or before 2017 was not great at all. It had many infirmities, which it will still have. So we have not lost anything. What we have gained is that the playing field of electoral politics had been made even for all political parties, and citizens' right to know where do political parties get their money from has been restored. This is all that has been done. The money that political parties were getting through electoral bonds was a very small fraction of the total amount of money that they get. So nothing is going to change. There is only one solution, which is that all donations to political parties be made through digital means. And the rationale for this is that when demonetization was done in the country, it was said that we are moving towards a cashless economy and towards a digital economy. And citizens were told that even if you make a payment of 10 rupees to a rickshaw puller or to a vegetable vendor, you should do it digitally. And if we can pay 10 rupees to a rickshaw wala or a vegetable vendor through Paytm or another UPI-based application, why can't political parties get all their funding through UPI? Why do political parties need a 2,000 cash window or a 20,000 unaccounted cash window? All donations to political parties should be made digitally based, UPI-based electronic transfers. That is the only way we can have transparency and we can have an electoral system which is free of the maladies of under-the-table transactions, whether they are use the euphemism electoral bond, where huge amounts of money are paid to political parties for quid pro quo. And these quid pro quos for the appropriate development of the country need to be brought out in the open. Citizens should be able to make an assessment about every policy and action of the government, whether it was being done in national interest or the interest of the people, or in the interest of some particular corporate which gained by that particular action. And under the euphemism of electoral bonds, unaccounted money was paid by that corporate to a particular political party.
Use UPI payments for election funding. I mean, that's one of the suggestions, Kartikeya. I want to ask Mr. Malhotra, how practical is this suggestion that Mr. Chokar makes, that you need to have UPI payments, for election funding of political parties? As Kartikeya was saying, his phone is today his wallet. Indeed,
Yes.
it is for most of us. Is this practical?
I think you are raising a very valid question, and it is one of the mode through which the election funding or the political funding can be done, no doubt about it.
Right.
But I think Yashwant and Kartikeya both mentioned about the alternate funding processes also. As economic reform is an ongoing process,
Yes.
similarly, electoral reform is also an ongoing process.
Yes.
And for the purpose of ensuring a free and fair election, how the political party should be funded becomes very, very important. So
Right.
from that point of view, I think you mentioned some of the reports were mentioned. These are only few. But you look at the reforms which have been brought in the past from 1950 onward, amending the Representation of People Act, or
Yes.
the instructions issued by the Election Commission from time to time in exercise of power under Article 324 of the Constitution of India, the power which is given to the end for ensuring free and fair election. They fall within the domain of because Election Commission, not because it is specifically written in the Constitution, but because it is the responsibility of the Election Commission to ensure free and fair election. Similarly, in case the electoral reform has to come, there has to be a strong willpower of the political parties. And let me tell you, based on my experience as a student of law, having worked in the law ministry,
Right.
I find all the electoral reforms which have come so far have come either through the Election Commission or through the judgments of the
Yes.
Supreme Court, and not because of the will of the political parties.
Right.
So if we are looking for one of the suggestions which was given, probably, I think Mr. Yashwant made that suggestion, that the Supreme Court has also laid down that in case the process of electoral bond is unconstitutional, then what should be followed? I think had the Supreme Court given that kind of direction, probably the Supreme Court judgment would have been criticized on the ground that it is entering into a political domain.
Right.
Now
You
it
mentioned
is
that,
therefore for the government to come out with the alternative scheme, and if for that alternative scheme, like for one nation, one election,
Yeah.
the government has constituted a high-level committee.
Right,
Why don't
right.
you constitute a high-level committee and ask them to come with some recommendation within 2 months, 3 months time, which government consider, and in consultation
Yes.
with all other political parties, the
Right.
funding can be structured in such a way so that the black money doesn't come in, cash transactions are stopped, and the instrument like UPI and all that can be used for
In
payment.
fact, I'm going to ask Yashwant this point that both the panelists mentioned, that using UPI to pay for political parties. I mean, that's one of the biggest successes of this government. Why not transfer that to the electoral arena as well? Like Swiggy, Zomato, and now political parties, you can pay them through your phone.
Well, of course, but that is the micro donation part of it. I mean, I'm sure there would be a great muscle power to it, given the population that
Yes.
we have, given the kind of support with the political parties we have. But at the same time, we have to understand the kind of expenditure that elections are witnessing in India, not just
Yes.
India, but everywhere. The amount that goes into that campaign and everything, that just that. For example, let me give you a very small example of what the prescribed limit
Yes.
of election expenditure is officially, and what they actually end up spending are two different things.
Yeah.
And it is a global problem. That's why you have PACs in US.
Yes.
Because their expenditure is not counted in the political expenditure as such.
Right.
So no matter what you do, there would be fine solutions available, and people will go around that. So
Right.
the idea is to accept and appreciate the fact that the amount which election commission or the bodies or the poll bodies think that this is what is spent on electioneering
Yes.
is nowhere near even the actual amount what is being spent on the ground.
Absolutely.
So somebody has to be much more pragmatic about it. That the amount that is allowed is hardly 5% of what the amount is spent. So let's take that thing, open it up
Right.
and be transparent about it. Only thing what I am saying is that I totally understand that if Supreme Court would have done it, people would have said that is for the
Yeah,
lawmakers.
it's getting
to
into the
do it.
policy making.
Yeah, but Supreme Court could have suggested the line.
Yes.
And why don't you come up with a solution like this?
Right,
which is
absolutely.
Probably Supreme Court can always suggest something. It's not just about
Great.
giving
Closing comments. Thanks, Yashwant. Closing comments, Kartikeya, on this.
I would, a lot of people I spoke to, some said,
Yes.
this is a case of judicial overreach. I don't want to get into that, but you see, the only point I would try to make is that the beauty of Indian democracy is that you don't need to be rich to win elections.
Yes.
You have had people in this country like Manik Rao Gavit who were
Yeah.
MPs for 7 times.
Yeah.
And I've seen that gentleman in UPA 1 and 2, he would come by an old ambassador.
Yeah.
You had people who had won elections and their basic income is not more than 50,000.
Right.
It's not like American democracy. My biggest worry as a journalist is Americanization of Indian democracy. If you don't
right,
have 1 billion,
right.
2 billion in the kitty,
Yes.
you don't get to fight. You can't fight elections.
Elections becoming
So,
a rich man's game. That's an important point. Kartikeya, we're totally out of time on this segment, but thanks very much. State funding of elections, UPI, some of the very, very innovative methods of funding Indian elections suggested by our panelists. Ms. P.K. Malhotra, Yashwant Deshmukh, thank you very much for joining us on this segment of the return to the Suitcase Raj.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.